what began happening, what I discovered as I was writing the book, was what had begun as being a story about somebody else. It somehow ended up being a narrative of not only a pilgrimage and travel narrative, but also being an account of how the plants work to heal. And this is what makes the book a little unusual. And the reason that I wanted to contribute this to the field was, in reading literature on ayahuasca, it was descriptions of healing experiences were kind of segmented and sort of cut and pasted, and then there was theory about them. But I didn't feel like a fully depicted journey into that other world and back again, and how the sentience of the plants actually worked had been well accomplished yet. And so I set myself to task to do it, and as I wrote and traveled, the doors kept opening up. And eventually I encountered my love and my wife, Susanna, and we joined forces, and lo and behold, we ended up living in deep jungle for 5 months in a apprenticeship learning experience in the tradition of Vegetalismo. And I think Vegetalismo is maybe the least known of the traditions that work with entheogenic plants. And I'm not going to try to describe it. It's too big of a topic. There are good books on it. My book attempts to do it. What I think I'll do instead is just read from my book, and you can get an idea of how I tried to capture how this world works and what the people are like in it, and how the plants heal. So let me, I'm actually going to start reading from well into the narrative when we've arrived at a healing center named Mayantuyaku. Now, the music that we were listening to at the beginning as you were coming in were ikaros. And the ikaros are the healing songs that are sung by the shamans for their patients to direct visions and ceremonies with plant medicines. There's, in fact, they're used for all kinds of things down in the Amazon. They sort of vitalize the world and make it come to life in various qualities. And so the ikaros that we were listening to were of our teacher, Juan Flores, as you came in. And what I'm describing here is just sort of like what daily life was like in the jungle. So just going to dive in here. Brunswick came and sat down across from me one morning as I addressed myself to a plate of rice and lentils without salt. He had a tranquil but expressive face, and when he regarded things with his deep brown eyes, his gaze was completely unsocialized. He looked until he saw what he needed to see, and beyond that he couldn't be bothered. In a similar way, his movements showed an easy spontaneity rarely encountered among civilized folk with hardened personas. That morning's Brunswick's head was freshly shaved. He dug into a plate of roast yucca while he narrated a dream he had had the night before. I was coming to understand his sing-song accent better, and followed with interest his account of interviewing the spirits. Brunswick had come to Mayantuyaku fresh out of the military with a serious alcohol dependency. After curing himself, he stayed on as Juan's apprentice. We had not realized his status until one evening when at the nether end of a ceremony, a sound arose in the darkness of the Maloka that seemed to come from some subterranean region of grinding agony. It was Brunswick singing. Before long, I saw out of the corner of my eye the white figure of Susanna arising and leaving the Maloka. But I stuck it out, telling myself I was seeing a new aspect of Amazonian culture and should stay to support the debut of a young curandero. But as he enumerated the plants, calling each one to him, and asking it to heal him. His voice did not improve, and finally, when the moaning and dragging of chains showed no sign of subsiding, I discreetly exited as well. We had since learned that Brunswick was a remarkably sensitive apprentice curandero, and that his soul was not in torment. He simply didn't know how to carry a tune. That morning, he invited me to go into the jungle to harvest kame renako, a plant with healing properties for bone and muscle that I was starting to drink for an injury I had in my lower back. The plant kame renako is the one praised as sacred, page 158. On the carved signboard prominently hung in the Maloka, a tribute that came to be there because of a pivotal event that occurred during the early days of my Antuyaku. Out gathering plants one late afternoon, Juan made the fateful decision to collect just one more Chiricsanango growing at the bottom of a slope. As he took his final step to reach the plant, his foot caught the tripwire of a trap, and a shotgun went off point blank into his legs, shattering one of his tibia. With his flesh ragged and rapidly losing blood, Juan was carried out in a hammock and taken downriver to get a car to the clinic. Upon arrival, the doctor said he probably only had a couple of hours to live. They replaced his shattered bone with steel plates and gave him a blood transfusion, but it was because of the plants he had dieted for so many years, plants whose blood was already in his body, Juan says, that he did not die. After only a week, Juan returned to my Antuyaku, where he soon set aside his antibiotics and began dieting with kame renako, tamamuri, and other plants. He dreamt of their spirits coming and removing his cast, massaging and bathing his wounded legs. After 8 months, Juan was limping around with a cane. Then one night, he dreamt the spirits told him to drop the cane and run 3 times up and down a hill. He did so, and when he awoke, he never used the support again. By the time I met him, he didn't even have a limp and was rambling through the jungle. It was a fine day for a walk to visit the trees, so after eating, we set off, Brunswick swinging a machete at his side. As we rose out of the valley, Brunswick took a path I had not yet followed, and we soon entered the presence of gigantic, buttressed trees with vines dangling like serpents from their canopies. Palm fronds twice my height reached to the sun, filtering through the emerald vault above, supported by massive trees arrayed like the pillars of Gothic architecture. I was filled with the kind of happiness I experienced strolling in a medieval cathedral. But then I thought of Juan's words to us, that one must truly love nature and the plants to do a shaman's work. I realized that I loved nature, but it was more the noble nature of Ansel Adams, Emerson, and Thoreau. To love plants in the shamanic world is to love their spirits, to trust them and fully enter into their realm. We civilized types adore our coffee, tea, tobacco, and wine, all gifts from plants. But could I love the kame renako that I was about to drink as medicine? Brunswick halted before me, running his hand affectionately down the trunk of a small tree with stilt roots. "This is the Chuyachaki Kaspi," he said, "the king of the jungle. He brings the animals and teaches how to walk in the forest." The bark of the plant was mottled gray and green, and I didn't quite know how he picked it out from the other surrounding trees. When you diet with him, he teaches you about the plants in the jungle, but he can be dangerous too. He likes to trick people and lead them astray in the woods. "Okay," I said, feeling overwhelmed with information in the midst of so much anonymous green. "He likes to kick the trees with his clubfoot before it rains, and you can hear the sound ringing through the forest," Brunswick added, then nodded his head, satisfied. We set off again. Arriving at the summit of a steep hill, we halted and faced a tall tree half swallowed up by a vine. Then I understood the origin of the truly massive Gothic-looking specimens we passed on the way. What had begun as a single dangling string reaching down from an epiphytic plant in the canopy heights had taken root and then swollen into a muscular giant that would finally elbow its host out of existence.